Welcome to the Staffing Playbook podcast, your go-to resource for navigating the dynamic world of staffing and HR. I'm your host, Stephen Farrell. Join me each week as we dive deep into the strategies, insights, and stories that shape the staffing industry. From the latest trends to expert interviews and practical tips, we'll equip you with the right tools and knowledge to succeed in the staffing industry. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting out, the Staffing Playbook is here to help you play your best game. Let's get started.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Happy Friday. Welcome to the Staffing Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Farrell. Today's episode 13, is on conflict resolution. And I am joined by a regular guest from Grow Up Leadership, Ian McLeod. Welcome again back to the podcast. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm good, man. I was vibing to the music. I love the intro to the Staffing Playbook. Always fun.
Yeah,
Gets me excited.
Pumps me up.
Gets me pumped up. Speaking of getting pumped up, man. So I went to Formula One this past weekend
Out there in Austin?
In Austin. So at Circuit of Americas, I am fortunate enough to have a world-class international raceway that was built probably about 15 minutes away from my house, which is pretty amazing. So, and me and my family, me and my son especially, we've gone out to plenty of races out there. But this was the first weekend I've ever actually gone to Formula One. I've always wanted to go. Yeah. I like watching Formula One on TV and that kind of thing. I'm not crazy into it, but I do enjoy it. I've gone to several other races, though. They're smaller races, these vintage car races, Porsche Cup, kind of, different V8 races, different kind of smaller series.
That must have been a blast with Formula One in town.
So I was super excited about, it's been coming here for years and I haven't gone. Austin gets taken over oftentimes. The Formula One was really cool about, all these different companies come through, and Formula One itself, they do all these kind of fan fest events and set up things. So we've always gone to do that, but I've never actually gone to
bunch
the
of
race.
Tailgaters.
Yeah, so it kind of is. It's kind of like a tailgating, but they'll take over like some area in Austin, and then have some special showing of whatever. Porsche always does a big event here, which is really cool. So I appreciate it. Anyways, I got to go finally. My wife got me some birthday tickets, and I'm a fan of Eminem. Always have been. As far as hip hop and everything like that. Yeah. So iconic kind of person to go see. So it was a special day for me, certainly, to go. But I will say, man, I was a bit annoyed by the amount. I mean, so there's so many.
We need to have a conflict resolution.
There was some conflict there, and I was trying to resolve it internally, and I still don't. I feel like I don't have resolution. There were so many people there. And it felt like the vast majority were only there for whatever reason, because they just needed to show up or whatever. It was fashionable to be there, but like they weren't really. You could tell they weren't interested in a race. They didn't know anything about racing. And the same thing with Eminem too. Like they weren't. I was singing along, and me and my son were singing along and dancing along, and there's people just standing there. I felt like it was a reason to show up and do a lot of drinking. Was probably the main thing was happening, I assume, and just kind of, look how much money I can
Does that
spend.
surprise you though, when you think about it in hindsight?
I guess you're right. I shouldn't be surprised by it, but it's just amazing to me, the how sports, how there are people who are fanatics and fans of sports, yet there's so many people who go to events in general,
Hmm.
and don't actually care to participate, or they're just there to be a part of it, I guess.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, um, uh, I appreciate still that it's here and that people are showing up, but it was just
Looks like your buddy here, Mario. Looks like he was there too, maybe.
I think he lives in Austin
Yeah.
area ish, and he's gone to the race before. I think he shared, it was years ago, but I feel like he shared some of the same sentiments about the crowds and how ridiculous they are, and how many of them actually don't care about racing at all. He's much even more of a fan of he follows it for every race and that kind of thing.
I avoid conflict as much as I can, and downtown Austin on a normal day is like I can't stand it. So much
Yeah,
traffic,
yeah.
but when you have a big event going on, that must have
Well,
been
yeah.
insane.
It took us, yeah, just to get, and again, we're about 15 minutes away. It probably took us, well over a couple hours to get home. So, yeah,
Yeah.
Mario said,
He watched it from home, won't go back. Well, Ian, let's get to it. This is a topic that I think a lot of people can relate to when it comes to conflict resolution.
yes,
There was a study done that showed 85% of employees deal with conflict at some level. And on average, people spend 2.8 hours, we'll call it 3 hours a week dealing with conflict, which is, I mean, that's quite a bit if you think about it. 2 to 3 hours a week, average
yeah.
people deal with conflict in the
Well,
workplace.
and I think that's the question, right? Of deal with it. What does that really even mean, right? Are they, and I think getting at the heart of conflict and actually truly acknowledging it and doing something to address it can be helpful. There,
Yeah.
now, certainly there is healthy conflict that and natural that should be going on. You do want to create an environment where there's psychological safety and
Mhm.
trust enough between the various levels of management and employees and departments, where people feel that they can challenge each other,
Yeah.
and kind of push back on ideas, or try to introduce new ideas without.
Yep.
I think that there is some healthy conflict that you always want to have. I will say, one of the things that I think is important with conflict, and I'm not necessarily an expert, but I've tried to study as much, and certainly have had my fair share of conflict in the workplace. Um, uh, it's important to really to make sure that what you're trying to achieve, to understand what you're trying to achieve. If you're trying to simply win an argument or get someone to come around to your point of view,
Hmm.
that's not conflict resolution. That's maybe more persuasion with, maybe hopefully at least some negotiation, like you're looking for a win-win. But most people wrongly approach conflict resolution as a debate, where
Right.
you're trying to prove your point with facts and out debate your opponent. But the reality is there's no judges, or there shouldn't be a judge there who decides who won in conflict resolution. So I think
Yeah.
that's the place to start, is what are you really trying to achieve with this?
I like that. What's the expected outcome of this conversation that we're all dreading and having, whether it's with a peer or your boss or someone that reports to you? I think about, takes me back down memory lane where, I was taught there's typically three types of decision-making styles from leaders. That is autocratic, it's my way or the highway.
Hmm.
Then you have democratic, where it's just like, let the group decide. And then you have collaborative, where you let the group talk and figure it out. And then we come to some sort of resolution, and you kind of have the final say as a leader. And when it comes to conflict, you really have to think of it as dialogue, right? This is not a debate. This is not a fight. This is not a my way or the highway. You have to take that dialogue approach in conflict. And to your point, what's the expected outcome? And maybe the person you have in conflict with might have a different expectation of outcome. So you have to ask that question, right?
Right. Absolutely. I think one of the biggest problems with conflict is one side or both sides are not listening, right? Or from the other direction, they feel one side or the other side both feel as if they're not being heard. So the importance, oftentimes with conflict resolution, is ensuring that both sides are being heard, being validated, that kind of thing. I think when you see work environments that are struggling with low performance, low morale, turnover, there oftentimes could be conflict at the root of that problem. And leaders will try to mask it with maybe team building or training or some other band-aids, but oftentimes there's some conflict going on, and it's usually oftentimes between some potentially some group who has power and the group who feels like they don't. Right.
Yeah. I want to get into some of the pitfalls, common mistakes that leaders make when it comes to conflict resolution. I personally have made a lot of mistakes in conflict resolution throughout my career, and I'll continue to make them. But there's a lot that I've learned from some of these common mistakes. And so, what are some of the common mistakes you've seen and experienced, or maybe been at the helm of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing again is not recognizing that there is some sort of conflict going on, and that's usually the biggest pitfall. That again, that it's some other thing needs to happen. This group needs some extra training. They're not getting it. We need to do some a team building exercise, that kind of thing. Again, conflict at work is normal, natural, healthy, and it can be vital to the success. So I don't want to say like you shouldn't have debate and that kind of thing going on, but you want a culture that does challenge homogenous thinking.
Yeah.
But when conflict starts to negatively impact a business, whether it's the bottom line, productivity, quality, customer or staff satisfaction, you need to be addressing it. And I think that that's really the first step, is that you should be addressing it and not ignoring. And a lot of the biggest pitfall, I would say, is probably that a lot of folks ignore it, or should they try, there's a symptom that's happening from this conflict, and they're addressing the symptom, not the root problem.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right about that. I would say the number one mistake leaders make is ignoring the conflict. They push it off. They think maybe it'll, resolve on its own if I don't put any attention to it. But really, it's just like when your car needs an oil change and you decide, well, I'm just going to ignore that light saying, change oil.
Yeah.
And, eventually it's going to cause bigger problems where you could essentially have engine failure. Right. And now you're SOL. And so addressing that oil change, immediately it's time to go get it done. You get it done. Now everything's operating the way it's supposed to, and you can drive on. I find myself struggling throughout my career, even to this day, when there's a problem, that needs to be addressed. It's one of those things where you have to ask yourself, does it need to be addressed, or can it be fixed on its own? And, should I address it? When should I address it? How should I address it? And a lot of leaders they have it's just that fear. It's a real challenge. And I've learned that the faster you address it, the better, right? 99% of the time, addressing that conflict head on, for me, it's worked out. Maybe that 1%, it may have come back and I may have made it a bigger problem than it really was. But, that was probably likely, to your point, I was addressing the symptoms and not really the problem.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. there are certainly conflicts that you may see happening and they kind of work themselves out, or maybe somebody reacts to something and they need some time to process. That's a bit different. But when it's something where it's continuing to have an impact, that engine, that oil light or that check-in engine light is continuing to stay on, and it's having this ongoing kind of clear symptom or impact. You shouldn't be ignoring it at that point.
Yeah.
I think the way to oftentimes go about it, or at least the way that kind of experts oftentimes go about it, is it requires involving all parties. So making sure you find all the different parties who are involved in this, and bring them together in some way. So once you bring them together, you want to clarify the problem,
Hmm.
and then they can all kind of work together to find a solution.
Yeah, that's ideal. I found, and I'm sure you've seen this, a lot of people, they'll avoid conflict that they're involved in, and they'll hide behind maybe their supervisor, right? And they want their supervisor to deal with the other person that they're having a conflict with. And I really find that to be challenging, because you need the two parties together, talking it out, having that dialogue. And to your point earlier, with there's a certain level of conflict that's healthy for an organization, challenging the status quo, not just accepting it. But it's the way you go about it. There's a lot of prevention to conflict with that dialogue, but when it does happen, and it will, you have to be able to just listen to the other party, understand where they're coming from, and then express how you're feeling and what you're seeing, and then find this common ground where we can move together, right?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's where, if you have somebody who's maybe concerned, I mean, I might even ask them why they have concerns of confronting this conflict. And again, it might be oftentimes there's a power struggle in a lot of different conflicts. There may be what someone could consider an offender and a victim, right? And someone's feeling victimized, and so there's
Mhm.
potential. When you're a victim, you're actually just feeling some sort of trauma.
Yeah.
So having somebody to kind of facilitate that conversation, who's more of a neutral party, to moderate that, I think it's helpful, and it's important for that facilitator, that moderator, to understand the process of how they're going to facilitate that conversation.
Yeah.
If you don't have somebody like that, in place, or maybe it's a simpler thing and you're just having a disagreement, one thing I always suggest for any type of, or even the experts kind of suggest, is start at a place where you have alignment or agreement, right?
Mhm.
So um, you know meet people where they are and start from that place of agreement. So what do both sides agree on? We can both agree we want to create an excellent experience for our customers, right? So we both sides agree on that. Okay, how do we get there?
Mhm.
And make sure that other side feels heard. And then once they've shared their side, right, their opinion, their idea, whatever it may be, then you can say something like, um, may I ask for, is it okay if I share, are you open to an alternative idea or an
Mhm.
alternative solution? And then you can start to launch into and hopefully by that time, once they feel heard, and that's typically where that frustration and that anger, like that conflict, is coming from, is they just don't feel like their side is being heard, or
Yeah.
their idea is being heard. Then you can present yours and have kind of a back and forth, and hopefully come to some sort of agreement.
Yeah. It obviously, ideally, you want people to be able to work things out together, but
Yeah.
doesn't mean that always happens, right? And it rarely does. And so that's when you need a facilitator, right, to bring the two parties together, to find that common ground, like you mentioned, where they're aligned. Like, look, our common goal is we want to service our customer, right? And so let's start with that, and then that's both find our path to that common goal. I've experienced this in my career where I'm one of those parties, in a conflict, and my supervisor came in, just like bulldozed right through it, didn't ask a lot of questions, made assumptions, and gave directive, and really just kind of missed the point of the conflict. And I think it's a real challenge among leaders is we make assumptions with the little information that we have, and we think we have the solution, and we're just going to go through and take that autocratic approach. And I'm curious, in your mind, is that an effective approach, or not?
I mean, effective is the interesting word, right? I mean, it depends on what you find effective. I mean, so that is certainly an approach if you are creating kind of an autocratic environment where it is just, leadership is making all decisions and we're pushing things forward and everybody else needs to just kind of, heads down and do what we tell you. Kind of approach. I think, oftentimes what happens in that situation is it's not even that the supervisor or that leader is intentionally trying to be, this mean boss. It's simply that I think leaders, we oftentimes feel this need to be the problem solver and always coming up with a solution. And the solution for them oftentimes is, okay, I just need to fix this. You two are having this argument, or there's this problem in the team, or this conflict going on, and I need to fix it. And so let me just tell you what it is, and this is how you're saying this, and you're saying this, and both of you are wrong, and you're wrong, or whatever. And that, unfortunately, I mean, it does move. It can move things forward, but it's not an actual solution to that conflict.
Yeah, because you want to have a culture of openness and open communication where everybody has their voice. Because you can really kill morale. You can make the problem much worse.
Yeah.
If you go in, just it's my way or the highway. And there are certain scenarios where that probably fits well, where it's like, look, guys, stop. Like, everyone knows better. Let's be adults. Let's move forward. But that's usually not the case.
Yeah. I mean, the idea of shutting it down, I need to shut this down. Well, I mean, that's what you're doing. You're shutting it down, and you're shutting down any continued kind of discussion or debate. And what'll happen is these people won't share ideas going forward.
Yeah, they're going to shut down themselves.
Exactly. They're checked out. And that's how you get the, people who are unengaged. And, there's been substantial research by Gallup and other organizations to show that, that's probably one of the biggest problems for performance, morale, retention is unengaged employees. So,
yeah. Now, you'll probably agree with me. Most conflict is just communication breakdown, lack of communication, over communication, types of communication of how you're talking to people and the delivery, in the way, in your tonality and the words that you use, whether it's in person, over the phone, or email. But then there are some conflicts that are where, as a leader, you've got to raise your hand and go, I need to get HR involved. I need to get legal involved. I need to get safety involved. And I think a lot of leaders are just not equipped to know when to raise their hand and say, I need help with this conflict.
I think if you are in a leadership position and you are feeling unsure, and it feels like it's bigger or there's some deeper root problem, it is always better to err on the side of caution, and you should be partnering with HR, routinely. I think that unfortunately there are many workplaces where they lean heavily on HR to be the kind of the bad guy or the person to come in and enforce and fix everything or that kind of thing. I think instead HR should really be a partner to you to help provide some consistency. They should really be there to kind of calibrate and help you kind of understand, okay, this is how, and they should hopefully have some tools for you. I think, whoever your director is, or your VP, or whoever you're reporting up to, these kind of these people want to be aware of what's happening with these kind of challenges.
Right.
So I would suggest maybe oversharing sometimes, or making sure that you're involving these folks. And it doesn't have to be, much involvement. It's just, hey, there's this conflict going on. I'm thinking about this.
Yeah, help me see all sides. Help me see my blind spots, right?
Yeah. And I just want to make sure you're even aware of this happening, that this is, I'm going to go into this meeting and talk to these folks about this, but I want to give you a heads up beforehand. So I think, that's what those folks are there for. That's what your leadership should be there for. They should be there to support you. Unfortunately, if you do have a boss or an HR who's like, I don't have time for that, that's a whole nother level of issue at a workplace that's probably for another podcast.
So another question for you, Ian. Typically in conflicts, emotions are high. And whether it's the individual parties, those emotions are high, or maybe it's the leader. How do we as leaders, or even individual parties, like de-escalate the situation before it gets out of control? How do we kind of level set, bring those emotions down? Because it's human, right? We have emotions. Although if you ask my wife, she'll tell about me. She'd say I'm emotionless.
I get the same thing. So I think, an important aspect to any de-escalation, oftentimes what's happening is the escalated party is not feeling heard, right? They're feeling victimized in some way. They're feeling some trauma. So have you heard of restorative justice? Concept called restorative justice?
No, I'm not familiar with the term.
So it's more of an approach really with violent crimes is where it kind of started, but with criminals and victims
Justice
of that. Right. And so there's a program it actually started in the Bronx and Brooklyn called Common Justice that kind of implemented this successful model. That what they do is they bring those involved in violent altercations together to develop shared solutions as an alternative to incarceration, or along with their incarceration, that kind of thing. Because oftentimes what they find is that the victim they've been victimized, and then they're just this person goes off to jail, but they never interact, and that person.
So they bring the victim and the
so they bring right. So these are situations where like this person stabbed this other person, robbed them and stabbed them, and they bring them together. And so, it in the system of criminal justice, it's a system that focuses on, again, rehabilitation of offenders through reconciliation with victims. So it's a bit, obviously,
I've never heard that.
Yeah. So it's actually had quite a bit of success, simply because both sides, right? The victim actually gets to share how terrible this was for them, right? That you did this thing, and at the same time, that other side gets to share potentially what caused this to happen anyway, that kind of thing. So I mean, obviously, there's hopefully there, in most workplaces, there's nothing happening to this degree where it's this level, right? But I guarantee you, there are many employees who may feel like a victim of management's offensive communication or policies or decisions or something like that, right? So that there is oftentimes that happening. Trauma and feeling victimized is often associated with powerlessness. So people, employees who feel powerless will act out with what they can control, right? So, again, that decline in productivity, quality, that kind of thing. Negative surveys, escalating feedback to the top, quitting, those are all things that they can actually control. So that's them. They're when you see that in a workplace, that's that's those employees exerting the only power that they have when they feel powerless from a perceived trauma or threat. So as an employee, you should be trying to resolve that. So with restorative
Yeah.
justice, once you bring all parties involved together, you start with the explanation. So it's not about an apology, it's about an explanation. All parties have an opportunity to share and acknowledge each other's truth, right? So this is my perception of the situation, and this is my truth. Whether it is exactly true to you, this is how I perceived it, and the other side gets to share the same thing, right? And oftentimes when you have that violent conflict, okay, if 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 one person may have stabbed the other, the other person may have been, that criminal may have perceived that other person as a threat or something like that, or there's something
Sure.
else going on, right? So
Yeah.
it may lead to a volunteered apology, but that's not the expectation. So the effort is to heal through finding their common connections and kind of
Yeah.
shared goals.
That
So
common ground you spoke of earlier.
exactly. So, people management, it often boils down to striking a balance between customer, employee, and business needs, and helping everybody understand there's different needs. So oftentimes, when you have management who may have made the decision, they didn't explain it well to employees. This employee is really impacted by this thing, but the management may have a great reason. They just haven't explained why, that kind of thing. So being able for both sides to really explain, okay, well, management, you made this decision and it had this real strong impact on me, and
Hmm.
management can say, well, this is the idea or the reason why that we made this decision. And then again, it might evoke certainly a volunteered apology, but it's not just. Oftentimes I think what happens with conflict resolution is the idea that when you bring supervisors and HR and a facilitator, you're just, like, you remember how it was when you were kids, like, that you would make each other, like, the parent or the teacher would make one apologize or both apologize and, like, shake
Hmm.
hands or hug.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
I had to do that 1,000 times.
I as well, certainly to my sister, for sure. And that unfortunately doesn't resolve the conflict. It forces an apology, which isn't genuine,
Yeah.
and doesn't really resolve that conflict.
That's a really good point. That does remind me of a question I wanted to ask you about, you know, balancing empathy and accountability when, as a leader, you're resolving conflicts, because you want to be empathetic to both parties, or just an individual party that might be the offender, and so you have to have a level of empathy, but also you can't ignore the accountability side of what they did needs to be addressed and course corrected. Shouldn't happen again. How do leaders walk that tightrope?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a challenging aspect, and uh, so I think the point of conflict resolution is, again, both sides are being heard. Really, what empathy is understanding the other person's perspective, right? Being able, and I think there's oftentimes a confusion between, and this again may be another separate podcast of empathy versus sympathy.
Mm,
Sympathy is more, I feel for you, I feel bad for you, or I feel a certain emotion for you, versus empathy
yeah,
is, I understand the reasons why you feel this way. um uh it, Empathy doesn't have to be, and I think there's a confusion here oftentimes. Empathy doesn't mean that you necessarily agree. Like, I understand. So those people, when I was at the F1 race, and I didn't, I may have not understood why they were there. Or I was frustrated why they were there, right? And that created some feelings. But my empathy, because if I can get that explanation from them, I can at least understand it, right? I don't agree with it. I don't have to agree that you showed up to a race and this event and all you care about is drinking beer. and not actually viewing or watching it. So I don't have to agree, but I at least understand that they have some other reason behind that. And so it's the same thing, it's just uh, helping people understand. Again, it doesn't mean that you have to agree. And in the case of restorative justice, they're not pushing for an apology. Again, that might be volunteered or offered, but
Yeah.
what they're trying to get is make sure that both sides share their side, and that the other side at least understands and hears that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great perspective. I think being too empathetic without enforcing boundaries can, often lead to more issues. And so I've had to remind myself that many times where, because I understand, why this person did what they did,
Yeah.
even though it was the wrong decision. But I still have to reinforce, like, I understand why you did it, but now I need your help to course correct so it doesn't happen again. And versus, like, I understand why you did it. That's terrible. And, I get it, Ian. And so let's just move on. And you've got to set some boundaries in the workplace to make sure those issues don't continue.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, that's what I was, kind of oftentimes people management is really having that balance between, customer, employee needs, business needs. And so if somebody's having, say, attendance issues or something like that, and we're this is a bit beyond conflict resolution or different, but let's say we're
But no,
having
I want to pause you for a second, because that's a big issue in the workplace. Is
absolutely. I feel
attendance.
like we could certainly do a full podcast just on
Yeah.
that. That's a common conversation I have with other leaders, and certainly I would say the vast majority of any performance management, particularly any corrective action or even terminations, oftentimes involved an issue or a performance issue with attendance. So I feel like
Yeah,
that could be a future podcast for sure. But just in general, I can understand you, employee, that you are having these issues. So that's the empathy, right? Like, I understand that you have these issues of getting here on time, or that you're ill, or that you have these other things going on outside of your life. Totally understand it, and I totally get it. As a human being, I understand it. I live this too. We all, have challenges. From a business standpoint, we have to have safeguards in place, or expectations in place, as far as certain standards. As far as how many occurrences or absences, unscheduled absences you can have. And that's to be fair to the other employees, that's to be fair to the customers, and ultimately to be fair to the business, and to be fair to yourself. Look, if you can't get here, that's a whole nother thing. Is this really a great job fit? That kind of thing. So you have, you still can be empathetic and understand. I understand, but this is a standard that we all follow, and we're all calibrated, and we hold all employees to this same expectation. So that's why we're moving to this next. We need to correct this, as you said, and hopefully most people get it, and we'll correct it. Unfortunately, sometimes people don't.
No, that's a great point. I had a gal that was constantly 15, 20 minutes late every day. And it wasn't even like car problems or transportation issues. When I asked her about it, after it was going on for a week or two, she's just like, look, I'm not a morning person. I have a really hard time getting up and out of bed. And I said, okay, I empathize with that. I get it. And so, but on the other hand, our common alignment here is we need to be here for our customers walking through that front door. And, the reason you're supposed to be here at 7:30 a.m. is so you can take care of those customers that are coming in at 7:30 a.m. And so if we can't be aligned on that, we have to come up with a different solution. And so I said, I just made the suggestion, would a later shift work better for you? So because you're not a morning person, we have a shift that starts at 10:30. It ends a little bit later, but it sounds like you might like that because you probably, stay up at night. And she was like, oh my gosh, I never wanted to ask, because I thought, you hired me for this shift, and, I didn't want to look bad, and so I never asked. So she was like so thankful that we found that common ground, and then she took that 10:30 a.m. shift, and she was wonderful. She did great at her job, and she was on time every day.
Yeah, and that is an excellent example of how management and people management should be occurring, right? That you share an issue, like, okay, and here's our expectation. Here's an issue, you're not performing at that level. um what's going on, and then you listened, and you were, in this case, you were able to provide a different shift that actually worked for this person, and I think that's excellent. Not addressing the issue, letting the issue escalate to the point where you were simply just delivering some corrective action without explanation, without discussion, where it's a very formal kind of thing, or in some cases just, look, you've been late 10 times, in the last month. We're going to go ahead and terminate your position. That is unfortunately a poor approach, because there oftentimes may be a simple solution to this. There may not, but you would never know until you have that conversation. So I
Yeah,
applaud you in that. And I think that's exactly what you want to do with people management. And you're trying to find that balance.
that's
Uh,
right.
and especially with something like that. I mean, I think probably the number one thing issue within any workplace is probably, attendance and schedule adherence and that kind of thing too. So having some
Yeah,
empathy, but also making sure to be clear about the expectations and holding people accountable to it is the best
yeah,
approach.
you need both. Now, you
Right.
mentioned earlier, I want to wrap this up with kind of this
Yeah.
last topic here. You mentioned earlier about conflict can actually be healthy for teams in some way. And I want to go into that a little bit. Tell me a little bit about why conflict can be healthy for teams.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I think this is where, the same argument is made for, diversity and inclusion, and creating a diverse work environment. It's simply that you're going to have, what you're trying to foster is diversity in ideas, right? And some of the best leaders out there are those ones that ask to be challenged, and they literally
Mm,
are asking, that here's my idea. Shoot holes in it, devil's advocate, that kind of thing. What are the problems? There is a famous behavioral scientist by the name of Klein. I forgot his first name. He would actually have this process that he would do anytime they were working on a project, or going into some new big event project kind of thing that they were going to do. They would do something. Have you heard of a postmortem? Postmortem meaning, like, after things have gone wrong, you get together and kind of talk about all the reasons
yep.
why. So he invented this thing called a pre-mortem. And the concept is let's all get together and imagine this project that we're all going to go launch and work on. Um, it failed miserably. I want everybody, spend the next 5-10 minutes, write down the as many reasons as possible as why, right?
Wow.
And not share them out loud. Don't, write them down, and then let's go through all those different concepts. The idea is, what you're trying to do is, you're trying to get those, because there could be something, you as a high level leader may think that we have this great idea, but you haven't thought about all the little bitty things that may severely impact something, or change something, or be a roadblock or an obstacle. And you want to create that atmosphere where people are sharing their ideas, their concerns, their challenges that are happening for them currently, or that they foresee in the future. You want people to challenge, and speak up. And so that, again, I think, is really why you want to foster healthy conflict and healthy debate.
That is a great idea. Yeah, I I'm with you. I think conflict can spark innovation, ideas, open people's minds up to new things and different perceptions. And it really, it goes back to how you communicate, have a dialogue approach versus just, here's how I'm feeling and I'm not going to listen to you. Here's what I want to do, and I'm not going to listen to your ideas. It's just, if you can have that two-way dialogue, you can avoid a lot of that conflict. Yes, it can be tense because these might be some really strong competing ideas, and the best idea wins. But you can do it and with some diplomacy and some professionalism and remove a lot of that emotion.
Yeah, I think some of the best leaders. There's a famous psychologist, Daniel Kahneman. He talked about how much he enjoyed being wrong. And he's a super smart guy, probably one of the most celebrated psychologists currently. And he would talk about oftentimes how he enjoyed being wrong simply because that was an opportunity for him to learn. So, and I think if you take it as an approach of this conflict can possibly help us learn and develop and create a better product, a better service for our customers. It'll only, ultimately help us achieve our mission. That's what you want. That's the culture you want to create.
Yeah. Yeah. Prove me wrong. I like that. That's the scientific community.
Yeah.
They're looking to be proved wrong, right? Every single day.
Absolutely.
It moves the needle that much further in the community.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, Ian, this has been a fantastic conversation. I know we could have went down a rabbit hole on every one of these questions. Any other thoughts? Anything you want to wrap us up with?
I think, again, we've talked a lot. I think the one thing is, if you're not sure what to do, and I will say this with everything, is always try to think about what is the goal you're trying to achieve here. Are you trying to win an argument, or are you trying to, help move this forward or achieve this mission or something like that? And then the other aspect, again, is if you're not sure where, like, you're having a back and forth or a disagreement is happening, find and figure out and start with where you two are aligned. Because I guarantee you, regardless, most people can align on something or agree on something. Start there, and then you can build from or go out from there and kind of build towards a potentially or hopefully a shared solution.
Yeah, that's just the best advice you could give anybody. Find that common alignment, that goal that we're all working towards. Like, at the end of the day, we're trying to take care of our customer. We both agree on that. Now let's find let's find a path that we both agree to help us get there.
Absolutely.
Well, Ian, it's always a pleasure having you on here, sharing your insights. If you don't know Ian, check him out, Grow Up Leadership. You can find his links in the description. You can click on his LinkedIn profile. But if your organization could use some consulting on conflict resolution, among many other, leadership and HR topics, please reach out to Ian. He's a great resource. Brilliant guy.
Thanks.
And apparently is not going to go back to the F1 race next year.
Probably not. Although I love it, but I will definitely be over at Circuit of Americas for sure. I will show up there, but probably not for the Formula One. It's a bit much.
All right. Happy Friday, and we'll see you next week, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Six months ago, I get a call from Steve Farrell, who wants to talk about partnering with Yes for our labor needs. It would
change your approach to staffing.
Change my approach to staffing?
We're short on employees. Again. So we're going to have to shut down a line. Sorry.
I told him I've already used multiple agencies and have had headaches with each one. So my approach to staffing is just fine.
With multiple agencies, we thought we had our staffing needs covered.
I had negotiated a super low rate to save on labor costs.
And I could pursue my passions outside of work because I never had to stay overtime due to turnover, productivity, or training issues.
The agency sent quality people. Well, they sent people. Sometimes.
My love of language and lexicon languished.
I negotiated a super low rate.
Hey, the agency employees didn't show up, so we're short on staff again.
Bupkis. Curses. Fetch.
Hey, an agency sent an employee.
Do you have production experience?
I've produced YouTube videos. I'm hungry. When's my first break?
This is not sustainable. If you want happy customers and a healthy business, something's gotta change. So yes, we tried yes.
Yes focuses on finding the right people for the right job.
Turnover is down, productivity is up.
Yes trains
Or onboards.
quality employees, ensuring they have the skills
Or proper work ethic.
our company needs to succeed.
Thrive.
Yes provides us with quality data so we don't have to juggle multiple agencies to fill our needs.
They could have doubled our rates.
No, they could not have.
Okay, maybe not doubled, but Yes's cost was cheaper in the end. They solved our problems, which were way more expensive than a few points on rate.
I'm just happy that Yes provides us with good people.
Great employees to fill our workflow gaps.
And Yes brings them fast.
Yes specializes in production, warehouse, manufacturing.
And I love that Yes focuses on workplace safety.
Yes also offers services like time clock and
Payroll services, forklift drivers, pickers, packers, general labor.
I like how Yes customizes their screenings to our needs.
I love that we've hired many Yes employees as
Short-term, direct hire, seasonal work, part-time, full-time,
and long-term members of our company.
I love partnering with Yes. No more gaps in production, and I can focus on efficiency without stressing about costs or people. Yes really has
revolutionized.
changed our approach to staffing. Our people are happy.
Your customers are happy.
And that makes me
Delirious.
happy.
Delighted.
Happy.
Thrilled.
Happy.
Cheerful. Gratified. Ecstatic.
Happy. He said happy.
Sunny. Jovial. Tickled. Pleased.
Happy.